Can something as simple as movement have the ability to change the world? To discuss this, today on the show, I have Kim Lowack. Kim's an occupational therapist and is extremely passionate about movement and its importance across the lifespan. If you're interested in occupational therapy, this is the place for you. This show aims to explore our profession by sharing who we are and what we do. Because for us, occupational therapy is more than just a job. Hi, I'm Sarah. Welcome to OT for Life. Hey, Kim. Welcome to the OT for Life podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
I am so excited to have you on and to just jump in and talk about movement and the importance of movement, and specifically the importance of early movement, such as like in infancy and the young childhood years. So I want to start, and I just want to know, what are some of the biggest things that you have noticed throughout your years as an occupational therapist that have had an influence of movement on development, anything that has stood out to you, or even like the lack of movement? Like, what are some of these things that you have been seeing over the years?
Okay, so over the years takes me through about 24 years. So my early experience was pediatrics. The middle part of my career was geriatrics, and then I've returned to pediatrics. So let's just talk about the older population briefly, because I feel like over the lifespan, that's what OTs do. That's what we do. We look at the lifespan. And so movement in the elderly is really death or life, in my opinion. Through my years of experience in home health and in the skilled nursing facilities, when the patient stops moving, when they become, let's say, wheelchair bound or bed bound, their health declines significantly. Now, there's so many body systems at play there. I realize I'm really overarching the thought, but it still applies. So let's say I want to go to the home health spectrum. When I see someone in their home who has come home from, let's say, hip surgery, super common, and they were active prior. They were gardening, they were maybe driving the car, even just simple, not super like running or anything like that, just basic life skills. When they have hip surgery, if they do not participate in their therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and they become sedentary, and over time they become more unwell. So we can see through all the research on hip surgeries, the death rate is extremely high. I'm not saying that people are dying like that, but what happens is the more they sit, the less their lungs operate, their brain isn't stimulated, their muscles are not pumping nutrients through their body, they become depressed, and their body begins to age at a more rapid rate. I even feel like it's super important for people who are looking at retirement not to have a sedentary mindset. Oh, I get to quit my job and sit at my house. It's a death wish. Don't do it. Keep your body moving. So that there isn't a doubt in my mind that plays a huge role and impact in the lifespan and the long-term health of each one of us.
Just to jump in for a second.
Yes.
I think specifically like what's kind of going on right now, I think a lot of us are finding ourselves in more sedentary positions, working from home or sitting in front of the computer. So yeah, I think what you're saying just ties right into like a lot of what's going on currently too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now let's go backwards, right? So I'm going to take what you just said and let's go back to the teenage years. Let's go into the kids who are spending their whole day on Xbox, iPads, et cetera, Their obesity rate is higher. The ADHD rate of diagnosis is higher than ever before. It's increased in the last 8 years, 46%, the diagnosis of ADD, ADHD. And that's not coincidental with all of our technology. So we're allowing it to dominate and make us unwell, unhealthy. Suicide rates, I have to say, I believe those are linked to sedentary lifestyles and thought processes, and then just the body chemistry that affects our health, of our mental health as well. So it's important to every life function, in my opinion. So now we go back to the babies. And this is where my passion has been renewed in this way, because I realize that's really specifically occupational therapists. They have so much influence in the lifespan of a person, of a human. And we can start when they're very, very little. And so movement begins in the womb. It is developed in utero. Our vestibular system is the first fully formed system, and it is completely formed in utero. The rest of our movement patterns and reflexes come from our vestibular system and how we're moving. So the vestibular system tells our bodies where we are in space, how to move through space, and how to resist gravity, and so on and so forth. So when we have complications in utero, or we have complications during birth, I think it's a missing piece that we aren't assessing more closely the movement patterns and the progression of movement and reflexes in infancy and childhood under the age of 5. It really needs to be in the first 12 to 18 months. We really need to have a better tool to determine if that child is at risk for further problems rooted in movement. They're all rooted in movement.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. And I know in my work that movement piece has really been something that has just over the last decade has really, really stood out to me. And it's to the point where like I can walk into a child's house and within 2 seconds, I can just be like, wow, like this kid is not moving. Like they're not getting exposure to movement. Maybe they're in a car seat or some sort of a container, like a play gym type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, yeah, like I can identify it so quickly. And it is nice because I know that I can now start to educate and move forward and get that kid to like have some movement. But it is also really, really interesting to hear some of those numbers and hear some of the literature that is talking about how it can impact people later on in the teenage years and into adulthood, and really how this movement piece in utero and in the very first month to years of life is so pivotal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's dawned on me in a new way. And I love knowledge. I love seeking knowledge and learning from others' experiences. So I don't have to experience everything to know things. Thank you, for all those researchers who share what they're doing in a way that's measurable and validated in the medical community. I understand the importance. You and I have experiences that we can speak to that are without a doubt valid, but we need people to take the time to, set up the studies and things like that. So I'm grateful for those. Movement in infancy is not convenient for mamas and daddies and caregivers. It's not convenient. It's not easy. And so we all have choices, and I respect everyone's choice to make the choice of how to care for their children. But if they're not able to connect what they're choosing for their child to future potential for their child, that's the piece we can play, because somebody's got to connect the dots for them, whether it's a physician, a nurse, a teacher. Teacher could be equipped to say, here's some things I'm seeing. This may be what's lacking, and make a referral. I just feel like education for this piece, I feel like we can have the most impact long term by jumping in at this point in a child's life.
Completely. Yeah. I have so much to say. I'm like, where do I even go with this? Because it is so important. And I think it's one of those things where society, and I'm going to make just a huge overstatement with this, but I think society puts a lot of praise on certain developmental milestones. And specifically, at least in my line of work, most of the referrals that are coming through for me in early intervention are because the child is not walking or because they are not talking. It's very rare that I am getting a referral because a kid is not rolling or lifting their head up or crawling, or some of these other milestones that are just as important. But generally, as a whole, society isn't putting the importance on that. And how many times I'm sure you've heard, and I've heard too, our clients are like, oh, my kid's just going to skip crawling. They're going to go straight to running. And I'm just like, wait a second, we have to go back. We have to go way back because there's a lot of things that happen very early on that is super, super important to being able to have that mobility and movement later on in life.
Yes, absolutely. So for the sake of our time together and those who are listening, I encourage you, if you're an OT, go research it. If you're a parent, go research it. I want to explain a little bit about how the nervous system develops. Can we go there for just a minute?
Yes, please.
It's very sciencey, very technical. But again, I want to connect the dots for those people who are listening. Okay, like, what are you talking about? When we come out of the womb, we integrate reflexes, and the reflexes dictate our movement patterns early on. So we aren't born with the knowledge of how to lift our head against gravity because we've been floating in water. So the vestibular system was developed first because we can estimate where we are in the womb in water. When we come out, we're now a land animal, so to speak. And we've got to figure out how to move against gravity. Now, gravity is a factor. So we must move the baby, holding them in positions, allowing them to develop the motor neurons. So we're born with our cell bodies, our nerve cells, and they are there, right? They say that we're born with the number that we're going to have, but the connections between the nerve cells are not there. And they're only developed through movement. Movement creates synapses, creates electrical impulses through the dendrites in between each cell so that it communicates. It's like a train track. It's like one part of the track allows the next part of the track to move to the next. So the train can move down the line. It's the same way with information from neuron to neuron, but it becomes stationary. It becomes inactive when we're sitting. So a baby's their higher level thinking skills are not there, right? They're like, oh, I'm hungry, I'm going to make a sandwich. They have no ability to do that. That's why we have to be with them 24/7. But they get there only because they learned how to sit up first. And in order to get to the kitchen to make a sandwich, we need to be able to hold our head up and look around with our eyes. Then we need to be able to sit. And then we need to be able to move in some way, preferably crawling first, crawling well. And then creeping and standing. And then we get to the kitchen and somebody shows us how to use a knife. So all these information pieces build upon the very beginning. And so hopefully that gives us a picture of how we build. And so when we have dysfunction, when we have disruption in the process, we really need to go back to the beginning and figure out where the gaps are still there. Because our bodies are amazing. We will create pathways around the areas of deficit or weakness, and we'll figure it out some which way. That's the amazing thing about humans. If you don't have arms and legs, somehow you can figure out how to probably make yourself a sandwich. But if we've got all of our abilities and capabilities available to us, but we're just not accessing them, we need to go backwards and move through these patterns so that those connections are made. That's why movement is important.
So important. But again, I think it's one of those things that it's overlooked so much until there's a specific reason that a client is coming to see us, maybe in the schools, maybe it's poor handwriting. I know that happens a lot, or difficulty with fine motor skills, or maybe later on in life with emotional dysregulation or something like that, difficulty focusing. And so it's like, I know, and I love everything that you're saying, because it's like, this has been something that I have been so passionate about and have taken so much time and invested so much energy into educating my clients, my students that come with me. I mean, I go off on just these rabbit holes of why movement's important, why crawling's important, why all of these milestones are so important. And it's not just to get from one to the next to like check a box. It is because, how you said, they build on each other. And if there is holes or some sort of a dysfunction within one of them, that's going to impact the higher level skills, the higher level thinking, the higher levels of that cognitive functioning piece. So
yes,
it's so important.
It's so important. And can I just say, in my personal opinion and my personal experience, kids are smart. They're intuitive. And they really do know when something isn't right, but they don't have the ability to communicate it. And so all of our emotionally disturbed or emotional dysregulation, acting out, outbursts, throwing, hitting, kicking, they're born from that child's frustration level. And if we just look past that behavior just a minute and give them some validity that maybe something isn't quite working right for them, when we remediate that, I cannot tell you the joy it brings me to see a child who walked in 12 years old, oh, or ADD, ADHD, he's a bad kid, he's terrible, he's horrible at home, what am I going to do? Literally in front of the child, the parent is saying this. And he's standing there all shrunken down and just, you can tell he's just, his self-image is what he knows he's capable of in the physical realm. And to remediate that over an 8-month period, I'm thinking of it, one particular child that I have. We made 3 years progress in his visual motor skills in 8 months doing reflex integration. Watching that child just last week strut in like a 12-year-old should, like, I am here. Let's do this. And his confidence level in his motor abilities has changed how he perceives himself. And to me, that's the key to the freedom that we want our kids to live in, that their potential is just right ahead of them. And they can't fully realize that until we help them with things that they just can't even identify, but they're feeling in their body. So that super duper excites me to watch a child's demeanor and self-concept just turn. And then the parent's like, oh, they're such a pleasure to be around now. And like, he's not yelling at me. And their relationship is restored. And then let's just look down the lifespan, right? Then he's a better parent. And then he wants to make sure. And so we influence so many things as OTs. It is the best career.
Oh, yeah.
It is the best. It is the best. So I digress there, but I just feel like that's so important not to get bogged down in the, you didn't make your P the correct way. Let's don't bog down with that. Let's look at why his hands aren't working. What are the basic skills that we need to affect? And then it eventually is going to change that child's perspective of himself or herself.
Have you found throughout your career that, especially when it's an older kid that comes to you, that you're able to look back at some of their milestones and talk to the parent and get kind of this history and realize that something was off? Maybe it was the crawling piece. Maybe it was they only rolled to one side. Like there was something specific that stands out that you're like, that makes sense to what I'm seeing right now. The deficits that I'm seeing right now, I can totally tell that it was because of this that had happened.
Absolutely. Yes. And it's funny because, you know, being a mom of 3, we forget things. And even my mom reminded me the other day, you know, your daughter, Alyssa, she really only crawled with like 3 of her limbs. She drug. And I was like, you know what? You're right. And so, yes, it happens all the time. The mom will say, oh, you know what? He didn't. Oh, we were worried, but it was like a week later and he crawled for like a week and we thought, okay, good, we're done. A week is not enough time to make all these connections happen. And so, yes, that really led me to the topic for my TED Talk was crawling can change the world. Because so many of my kids at that age and even younger, the moms will go, yeah, no, they didn't crawl. No. Oh no, he army crawled. He pulled himself with his arms and legs. Or no, he just, you know what? We knew it was going to be athletic because he just went straight to walking. And I'm like, oh, that's a tragedy. Honestly, that's not a good thing. And so gently and kindly, we have to discuss that was probably not the best thing, but not the end of the world. We can go back and work on some of these skills. So yeah, I mean, unequivocally is yes, there's definitely milestones in utero. A lot of times it's interesting when there's twins or triplets. Movement, there's just not the space. The space in the womb is not there. So many of these kids have movement disorders, visual motor disorders, vestibular disorders, because they didn't have the space to move. And so of course that's, you know, I try never to guilt a parent. They have no it's not anything that they did.
Right.
It's just the nature of whatever, modern medicine or, the triplets and quadruplets and all that. But it definitely affects it. And the history is important to gather.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So many things. Again, so many things to say. But I want to start with the twins and the triplets because I've started to realize I'll be working with both of them. And like, I have this set of twins that I used to see, and they were extremely different. One was very much like the non-mover, not really motivated, was just kind of happy-go-lucky. I'm just going to hang out. And then the other one was like the go-getter, like that one wouldn't sit still. And I remember at one point in one session, I was just sitting there and I was like, hold on. Like, I want to know where these kids were in utero, because I bet you one was turned on one side and one was over here. And that was like indicative to like some of the movement patterns that I was seeing. And so I like sat down and I was talking to the parents, and of course, they were kind of like, why is she asking me this? Like, I don't know. That was a year ago. That was 18 months ago, whatever it was. And then they like started thinking about it, and they were like, oh yeah, come to think about it, this one was over here and this one was here. And yeah, they just kind of hung out in those positions. And I was like, this totally makes sense to what I'm seeing right now. It's amazing that you don't think, and I'm saying you as like, we as society, we don't think that how we are in utero, how we are immediately when we are born, how we are within the first 6 to 12 months of life, how that can impact us later on. And to me, it's absolutely fascinating.
It's absolutely fascinating and exciting because we can start so early, and they never have to have an issue if we could just catch it early. Early intervention and prevention.
Early intervention matters. That's like, that is just one of like my mindsets, my mottos. I'm just like, by coming in and getting your kids seen and identifying, or at least ruling out that there is not anything going on, is so important. And the other thing that I wanted to kind of dig into a little bit, because this is totally one of my soapboxes, but let's specifically just talk about crawling right now, because I think it is that underestimated milestone. And you kind of mentioned a little bit, like some kids, they crawl, quote unquote, they crawl, but they're not hands and knees. It could be feet and hands, or one hand and the knees. It could be on their bottom and they're scooting. It could be that they don't necessarily get their core, their body up off the ground, and maybe they're reciprocating with their arms, but they don't have the body up the ground. Or maybe they're doing this kind of like more of like a seal kind of walk where they're not reciprocating. And I think like that's one thing that I see a lot, where especially when the kids are young and they're just starting to move, and the parents are like, oh, but it's so cute, he can move around now, he just scoots on his bottom. And I'm just like, it's not cute. It's not cute. And here are the reasons why. And you have to like provide that education. So yeah, let's dig into like why crawling specifically is so important.
Okay. So let's just start from the beginning, right? So we need to roll, and we need to be able to push against gravity. So there's some basic postural strength that needs to happen. When they get in the all 4-point stance, we know that they have at least the postural strength to move against gravity. Now, the amount of time that they stay in that position determines how well their skills are developed. So the head is the heaviest part of the body. So when the head begins to get fatigued, they're going to go back down onto the floor. They're going to lay or roll. They're not going to stay in that position. When we put our babies on our tummies, what do they normally do? Cry, fuss. They don't like it because it's hard work. So just simply setting a timer, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 1 minute. Then we watch their strength improve, and then they get okay with being in that position. This is crucial to their crawling, being on their tummy. So then as we're weight bearing through the elbows and the shoulders, our head is able to resist gravity. Our eyes are developing as well in the linear and horizontal, vertical and horizontal patterns, watching toys, looking for mommy in the other room. So in a diagonal pattern, we're developing all of those skills. Then we start rocking, we tuck up, the knees get tucked up under the tummy. Then we weight bear on the arms, we begin to rock forward and backwards. So the legs are starting to get integrated. These are all along the reflex patterns as well. So one will integrate and allow the baby to move out of the STNR where the knees are tucked, the arms are extended, and vice versa. Then the body says, okay, we're ready. We go up, lift the bottom up, and we begin to attempt to move. Now we're going to fall. We're going to, the head is still in control there. But what's happening is across the corpus callosum, the neurons are being fired right to left, left to right. And so our reciprocation begins to be developed. The two sides of the body are communicating. Left side of the brain with the right side of the body, et cetera, et cetera. For those who have had neurology, they understand how the brain will work. And you can't do just uppers and just lowers. You can't do just right side and no left side. So when there's a preference for 3-leg scooting, there's a leg that's not getting communicated in the brain. And that's not okay. And we need to fix that. So it moves the brain. Again, I guess I could go back to the primitive brain is the sensory systems. It's the motor systems, the midbrain, the primitive brain. That includes the cerebellum and then the vestibular system and all of those motor functions. Then as we develop into the next level, it's the limbic system, which is emotional regulation, attachment, these sorts of things. So it's like a pyramid. We have to build the base before we can get to the very tip top and think and do math and read and write. So that's why crawling is important, because we're missing the sharing of information in the brain that builds the next step. And we can't read and write if our body and our eyes can't coordinate to look down at our paper and refer to the whiteboard and then copy down what we saw on the whiteboard and then remember what we saw again. And then while all the same time, the teacher says, turn the page, watch me. Your friend over here is saying, hey, 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 hey. We can't coordinate all of that information. And it starts with crawling. It starts with rolling and then sitting and then crawling. So crawling is just a really great time where you can see all the systems at play. And so it's just a really opportune window to be able to determine what's going on in the brain.
And also, I think to add to that, it's also that sensory component too.
Yes, of course.
I've had so many kiddos that when they're a little bit older, they have some tactile defensiveness. And when I go and I dig into how did they crawl? How were the early movement signs? A lot of the times they ended up fisting their hands, or they were holding objects in their hands when they were crawling, or they were maybe not weight bearing on their palms, but they were on their forearms or something like that.
Yeah.
And when I start to explain to the parents about why it's so important that they have their hands open, that their palms are getting exposed to the ground,
yes,
and they're going from carpet to hardwood to grass to dirt
yes,
to sand to different textured rugs, like whatever it is. And then they're getting that weight bearing through the arms. Like all of a sudden, like the parents are just like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that was another component of all of these different things that happens when we are crawling.
Yes. And I'm really glad you said that, because you're right. It's giving them different textures to hold that then we will walk. I love kids that go barefoot. Barefoot is my favorite. We swaddle for comfort in the beginning, but then we need to let go of the swaddle at some point, and we need to let their skin be exposed to temperatures and textures, or the smell, just in general. Put them on a rug, tummy time on a soft rug, then a scratchy rug, then exposing the skin. It's our largest organ. It processes a lot of information. Definitely is huge for our sensory kiddos who gag on food because of textures and literally don't want to wear clothes. They throw fits to put their clothes on. And the parents are like, we can't go anywhere. They won't wear their clothes. And I'm like, well, that is a problem. Did they crawl? No, not really. You're like, you just can't deny the facts of, you can't make this stuff up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like total random comment. It's just like, it popped into my feed the other day. Have you seen, there's a little like video of this little girl, and she's probably, 6 to 8 months old or something. And her dad's holding her, and they're outside on a lawn, and she's happy and she's like calm and collected. And the dad's just holding her on his lap. And then all of a sudden he picks her up and goes to put her on the grass, and the legs just go straight up. I mean, it's like so fast, and it's just like boom, and the legs go straight up. They're not touching the grass. And then she kind of like looks at the dad and is just like, what? No. And so the dad brings her back, and then like she relaxes, everything's fine. Like she doesn't fuss or anything. And then he tries it again and it's like the exact same reaction. Like, I mean, it is just like, and it's funny for us, but like, I'm also just sitting there like cringing from like a therapist perspective of like, oh my gosh.
There's a problem here. Put her on the grass. Put her on the grass. Just do it. Just do it. She doesn't know what she needs.
Put her on the grass and then start singing a song, distract her, engage with her, like point things out. Like, I think that is another important thing is like a lot of times, at least I've found with some of the families that I've worked with, I'm like, okay, like we got to get you putting your kid in tummy time more often. And they're like, okay, cool. And they like pick up the kid and like put it in tummy time. And the kid starts crying. And I'm like, okay, well, we had to do tummy time, but like, it's hard. Like you said it earlier, like it's hard for the kids. They don't want to do it. So you actually have to engage with them, like get down on their level, show them toys, put things in front of them. If they're siblings or anything, have them start engaging with the kids. Like, it has to be fun. It has to be motivating for them to want to do it. It's not just like, I put you on your belly and you're going to be okay. Like there's all these other kind of components that all play a role in making those connections and establishing it where the kid's like, you know what, being on my belly is not too bad, or crawling isn't too bad because now I can go get that toy that I really wanted that I've been staring at for months.
Yes. It's making it a pleasure experience. And those associations happen there. Again, kids are very smart and intuitive. So if it's fun, then they won't know it's hard. They don't realize it's hard. They think it's fun and they would rather be engaged with mom, dad, or caregiver than worry about the heart. That always wins. Our emotional attachment, human connection always wins.
Yes, hands down. And I think that just like plays right back into when you were talking about the kiddo that had come in to see you and you were able to make all this progress with them. You weren't just necessarily honing in on all the difficult things that they couldn't do and just this redundant over and over and over of practicing how to do it. It's making it fun. It's making it engaging where the clients don't actually necessarily think that they're working at that moment.
Yes. Let me tell you, that is such a great point because the funny thing is I'm just not very traditional in a lot of ways. I let my gut guide me. And I try to become in tune to what's important to the kid and the mom, and we go there first. So I say that all to say, I really wanted his emotional state to have a shift so that they could enjoy themselves and enjoy being with one another. And then also coming to therapy and enjoying that time. Because the VMI, he scored at 5 years, 11 months. When he came in at 11 years old, he just turned 12. That was 8 months' time, and he's now scoring at the VMI a 9-year-old. Huge. Do you know what? We did no visual motor exercises. None. We did reflex integration at a very specific schedule. We did anti-gravity movement with swings and balls, and we karate chopped things, and we kicked the barrel, and we jumped over things, and we swung, and we played games. All to the tune of the underlying skills that he needs to develop in his brain so his eyes could work. We test the eyes and we've had 3-year gain and we didn't do any eye exercises. So it's about making it engaging, making it fun, and getting the buy-in of the kiddo. You know, at some age, when they're little bitties, it's the parent. You want the buy-in of the parent. But at some age, the kids start having to be invested themselves because then they start getting the wrong attitudes and they fight you and all of that. But when you get the buy-in, the dots for them, you say, we're doing these things for these reasons. Trust me. And they start working. And there's no other, you can't give credit to anything. It wasn't a medication. It wasn't anything else that they were doing. It was those exercises that were fun and engaging. We laughed, we sweated, we fell, we kind of didn't do things very well, but we did them together. And again, the human connection made all the difference, I believe, in making a change in his visual motor skills. And it seems very illogical, and yet it's not.
So I think you bring up a really, really good point with what you just said. And I feel like a lot of times we as practitioners get stuck on the goals. And if it is specifically, say, a handwriting goal or a very specific fine motor goal, visual motor goal. And then we feel this pressure from the funding source, whether it's coming from the school district or maybe it's insurance or whatever it is, private pay. It could be the parents that are like, hey, I want to address handwriting in my kid. And we as practitioners then feel like in order to address those goals, we have to always be working on that one specific goal. And I love that you said that you are able to make this huge amount of gain in the visual motor skills without necessarily focusing specifically on the visual motor system and visual motor skills. And that I think is just so important because we really have to, as therapists and as practitioners, we need to be better about advocating why it is what we're doing, why it's important, and how that actually correlates to the goal. Even though, again, I keep going back to handwriting, you're not doing pen and paper tasks. Mm-hmm. You're not having them write letters or sentences or phrases or whatever. You're doing all this other work, but people that don't understand that connection are going to look and say, well, you're not addressing the goal. You're not doing anything. And I think that's just something that like we as practitioners have to get so much stronger in being able to say, we are addressing the goal, even though it doesn't look like we're addressing that goal.
Yes, very much. We have to be better communicators. And we can't just be like, okay, therapy session. Thank you. Have a nice day. I think we give feedback. We say, okay, we worked on the swing in prone and we worked a puzzle while swinging. So we're activating a vestibular system, which is connected to the way the eyes work. And the mom's like, oh, I say mom because a lot of my moms are the ones bringing them in. And they say, oh, okay, all right. And then during this whole COVID thing, the telehealth, that has helped because I communicated with the parents and now we're doing it via telehealth. And I'm saying, put a piece of tape on the floor and make them walk on the line. Now stand on one foot, close your eyes. Remember, Mom, that vestibular system we talked about? This is what we're activating right now. And so then their home exercise program has been through the roof because they're bought in. They're understanding because you have to over communicate what we're doing. Absolutely. I feel like I want to interject right here. The vestibular system is underappreciated. And I'm going to say it again. There was a paper recently released and it's under peer review, so it's not been published. But the findings was that the vestibular system is, again, the first fully formed system. And what this paper found is that within the parts or the components of the brain that lie in closest proximity to one another, there is overflow when one part is stimulated. The part in close proximity is also stimulated and affected, again, by the electrical impulses. So the vestibular system is in the middle of the midbrain, and it has direct connections to our motor and reflex responses within the brain components. So the vestibular system has, in my opinion, I was never taught this. It is not quite given, the position of the head is not given quite enough attention. And the movement of the head and ears and eyes and all affects speech, it affects cognition, all of it. So I use vestibular movement as a base component of everything I do. It develops other parts of the brain. So we're always on a swing or we're moving. Again, look at that. Movement heals the body. It heals.
I love that. And I want to take a second because I know, and some of the areas that I've seen this happen in is specifically with crawling and specifically with like W sitting. I know that I've seen other professionals come out and say, it's perfectly fine that a kid skips crawling. It's perfectly fine that a kid W sits. And I know from my experience and the literature and the research that I've looked into, I'm like, I know other people say it's okay. And I actually just had this conversation with another OT just a couple weeks ago. And she was saying, yeah, somebody came in, gave an in-service to my company and said, crawling, it doesn't matter. It does not matter if a kid does it. What do you say to that? I know I value other practitioners, whether it's physical therapists, other OTs, whether it's doctors, but when they say something that that it kind of digs at you,
yeah.
What do you say?
What do you say? I would say, show me. Show me. I live in Texas, but I'm from Missouri, I guess, because you have to show me. But I seriously, I would want to know the science behind it. I would, because they've got to base it on something. And so I would want to know what their experience is. And I love those types of conversations that we don't all agree and we can all form our opinions. I love that choice, but let's not just flippantly say something we heard somebody else say. So I won't accept the information until I can read and study according to that perspective. So that's what I would say. I would say, show me where your evidence is, because what I've read and the research that I have seen, we're talking neurology. We're not just talking behavioral observations. We're talking neurology here. It's all connected. No system is disconnected from any other system. So why would crawling be disconnected from walking?
Right.
That's just not logical to me. So I would say no. I would disagree. Respectfully, right. I would disagree.
Yeah. And I think actually that's a really good point that you just brought up of like, rather than just take it for face value of what another distinguished professional is saying, go look it up. Go ask for their research or go just do your own digging, because it's really hard. I've walked into cases before where another professional has told the parent that it's okay that their kid is not doing, say they're not crawling. And here I am like, no. Crawling's super important. And I break it down and I review the steps of like, why? Because it touches on so many different things. But then when you have a parent that's like, but one person says one professional says one thing and one professional says another, that's a very difficult situation to navigate. And it's like, I don't want to be rude to other professionals, but I'm also just like, this is something that I'm passionate about. This is something that I truly believe. And this is something that I've seen in the literature that it is important. And that movement piece is just huge. It's absolutely huge.
And I would prefer as a parent, let's err on the side of try it, not skip it. Like, what harm is it in just making sure that we're crawling? There's no harm there. If we skip it, we regret something or decision. I don't want to ever live with a regret that I knew that I could change. So let's just try it. Let's just give it a try. I appreciate your input. And oftentimes, to be honest with you, I may have said before, oh, don't worry about that. Whatever a parent is worried about, just to ease the mind of the parent, because we carry such guilt as a parent, a caregiver. So maybe sometimes we say things just to ease the mind, like, don't worry, they're going to be fine. Like, I took my son in for strep throat and he had whatever white spots on his tonsils. She's like, don't worry, it's fine. But she gave me an antibiotic. Right? Yeah. So it wasn't going to be okay unless she had an intervention, but it's okay. Just chill out. Don't worry. And I wonder if sometimes as therapists, we try to just make statements like that aren't backed up or well thought through. So anyway, that's just a little side thought. I'm guilty of it as well.
Yeah. And I totally hear what you're saying. And I know that's something that I really like. I'm never trying to put blame on the parent. More, it's like the education of like why it's important. And then I'm always, whether they're coming in for an eval and I'm noticing something, or maybe it's a treatment that I've been working with the kid for a while, I always start by just saying like, specifically to the parent, I am so glad that you guys are here, because if you didn't show up, if you didn't bring your kid in, if you didn't have concerns, we wouldn't be able to talk about this. And right now you are doing the best for your child. Like, yes, maybe they skipped some things when they were younger and now we're having to kind of go back and address it, but it's not their fault. They were just doing their best at that moment. And so it's not this, like, it's not a judgment thing. It's really this understanding that I'll be honest, I'm a little bit of a dork when it comes to like this whole movement piece, the sensory piece, the crawling piece. Like, I know I preach about it, but not everyone else is so interested in this. So it's really just kind of sharing
all the time.
Just kind of sharing like why it is important and just shedding light of like, this is actually a big deal, even though it's kind of underestimated and one of those things people don't often think a lot about.
Yeah. So I don't know if I answered your question, but to the practitioner that thinks it doesn't matter, I say, let's have a conversation. Let's have an open conversation and then we can come to a conclusion.
Yeah.
But I'm still not going to be my mind's not going to be changed.
We'll talk about it, but
yeah, we'll talk about it. So you'll come to my side. No, I was just teasing. I do
Right.
like to have the conversation. It's very good.
Exactly. Yeah. So when it happens again and you have another family that comes to you, you're like, okay, well, I talked to this one practitioner and this is what they said, but let me tell you. Well, let me tell
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. That one's important. So,
hmm
yeah.
So, in thinking about everything that we've kind of talked about today and how important that both you and I know that movement is and early movement is and the influence that it can have, if you had one piece of advice for other practitioners out there in regards to this movement piece, regardless of what age they're working with, like what do you think that just like the biggest kind of like take home point that really just stands out to you that you want to convey to other practitioners?
I think I would say to them, make sure you look at the foundations from which the movement you're seeking comes from, because we are a hierarchical system in our brain. So something preceding the skill that you're looking at as a goal, that what you're looking to attain as a goal, has a preceding skill that was not mastered. So never stop with the movement that is presenting in front of you that's dysfunctional. Go one step before that one and look and see. And I think you'll find more of your answers there.
I like that. I think it's easy to look at what they are or are not doing right in that moment, but really taking a step backwards, taking a step before you get to that and investigating really what is going on. And I like that because that really can just be applied across the lifespan. And I know I come from a very strong pediatric mind and an early intervention mind. And we've been talking a lot about pediatrics, but kind of bringing it full circle again, you also have experience working with older adults, working with the geriatric population, and also have noticed this influence of movement or lack of movement with people across the lifespan. So it's not necessarily just saying that we have to focus on this in pediatrics.
Absolutely. No, yes, that makes me, and I was just as passionate about my geriatric population because we have to redefine occupation for them because they have been what they've been and they are who they are. And now at a very late stage in life, they lose who they are and what that paradigm has been for their whole life. So looking at what their movement activities were prior to the hip fracture, and if it was gardening, making adaptations. So at that point in life, right, it's about adaptations and modifications, not as much so as in pediatrics where it's remediation, where we're creating function, we're creating the future. When we're at the end of life, we're preserving life so that that can be enjoyed. So that means get a chair, pull the weeds from a stool, or not too low, but a chair or a stool. Get a reacher, pull the weeds with your reacher. So we're modifying, but we're still moving.
Mm-hmm.
We're still moving our body in ways that we can. And we move our bodies, we move our minds. Our minds become inactive when our bodies become inactive.
Yeah. And just bringing it back to something that you said earlier, that movement heals. Whew, that right there is just like, that has stood out to me that like, yeah, so much of what we do as occupational therapy practitioners needs to revolve around movement. If it's not, it should be. And it is because that movement piece, that is what heals. And that is what ultimately impacts and influences our clients as well as ourselves and everybody basically.
It heals every body system, every cognitive, psychological, psychosocial movement heals the body.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you feel like we didn't touch on? I know there's so much, but given the time, I'm like, I kind of want to start wrapping up.
It's so important. It ties into the conversation with the practitioner that has a different belief system about something such as crawling. Don't take one method. There's good in each method. Go learn multiples and then use the brain you were given to assimilate what you need for each individual client and take pieces from different perspectives. No one human has all the answers, but they all have validity.
That's huge. That's immensely important. And I know for me, in all of my treatment sessions, I'm always pulling from different frameworks, different models, different assessments, different ways of thinking. It's not just like a one size fits all. It's really adjusting it to the needs of the client, and then also tailoring one small thing from maybe one frame of reference, one way of thinking, and utilizing another one, and really just like making it about the client and as client centered as we possibly can to really impact them and make them get better and make them kind of overcome some of these issues that might have happened because of the lack of movement or inappropriate movement or something like that.
Yeah, we should always have the mindset that we are students. You and I should never quit learning. We should continually be students of human nature. We should be studying people all the time.
Yeah. Yes. I feel like that like just ties into like the OT brain and like not being able to turn it off. Like everything that I do in my daily life, I'm just always thinking about it from an occupational lens. And so I like that, like always be a student. So if people wanted to get in contact with you, reach out to you, learn more from you, how would they go about doing that?
Well, you can email me. I do have social media, so just Kim Lowack. You can always message me. My email is kim.lowack@yahoo.com. Email me a question. I would love to engage with you, have a phone call, anything. If you have information that I need to know, again, I'm a student, so I'm willing to listen and hear. So social media, kim.lowack, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I do have my TED Talk as well. I would love for them to watch that because it's a 7-minute little quick synopsis of what we've discussed today.
Exactly. I'm so glad you brought that up because that is actually how you and I connected, because somebody passed it on to me and was like, hey, you're really big into crawling. You should watch this. And I ended up I think I made it through like 2 minutes and I stopped it and I grabbed my husband. I was like, you need to listen to this. You need to watch this. I've told so many people about it and it's amazing. It's absolutely wonderful. And I will make sure I'll link to your email. I'll link to every way for people to get in contact with you, as well as I'll make a link to the TED Talk so people can check that out. And I highly, highly, highly recommend it because it's amazing. It's going to change the world.
You. I hope it does. And not for me, truly, it's not for my benefit. It is just, I was given the opportunity and I'm so grateful that there was a platform where we have a voice as OTs and how we can influence the future. And that excites me more than anything.
So I have one more question for you.
Okay.
If you could only have one word to describe occupational therapy, what would it be?
One?
Yep, only one.
Potential. We unlock potential in every person. Potential to become something great, what they were designed to be.
I just got chills. I love that. And oh gosh, I love asking that question because everyone just has such amazing answers.
That is it. That's it, man. If people could all realize their potential, do you know what we could do in this world? Phenomenal.
Yep. Thank you, Kim, for coming on. This has been a topic that I have wanted to talk about, I think, since even before I started the podcast. Like I've said,
wow.
Yeah, this is something that I'm extremely passionate and love, like kind of sharing the wealth of this information and this knowledge. And I think it is so important for people to hear. And so when I came across your TED Talk and I came across how passionate about movement and crawling and all this stuff like you were, I was like, yes, I cannot thank you enough for coming on. I continued to learn even through this conversation about this topic. And yeah, just thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful that our lives were connected and look forward to the future.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you hear, here are 3 easy ways you can help support the show. 1, head over to otforlife.com to find out more about any resources discussed on the show. Remember, that's OT4LYFE.com. 2, share the podcast with a friend, colleague, or anyone interested in occupational therapy. 3, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player so you don't miss out on any upcoming episode. And while you're there, be sure to leave a review saying how much you love the show. Thanks again. I'll catch you next time, OT for Lifers. Hi, Kim. Welcome to the OT for Life podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
I can't wait for this conversation. And, we're just going to dive in and talk about movement and specifically the influence of early movement. And like, I already made a mistake. I knew I was going to do that.
Yay!
Woo! We're just going to knock that out. All right. Maybe we'll just start over again.
Okay, just start over.
Okay. That will make it into the blooper section.
Do over.
Okay, take 2. This is like true life. Like,
okay.
Yeah,
I'm sitting, this is my study chair. Like, see?
I literally have my bed behind me, so I don't care.
This is my study chair, and I sit here every day. It. My sewing knitting box.
It's perfect.
When we move into a quadruped, that's funny. I get those mixed up. Ped and pod.
I think that's such another. I think, you said something earlier. I think, yeah. Gosh, I'm like, I always come up with something really good.
Sorry.
No, it's not. It's not you. And then I'm like, yes, I'm going to say that. And then you say something else. And I'm like, oh, wait, hold on. And so I lost maybe this is just me today. I'm just losing my train of thought. You were talking about
not doing any exercises, all the years of gains.
Yes. Okay. I got it. I knew I'd get back there.
Okay. Hopefully.
See, I'm going to make all the mistakes today. It's perfectly fine.
All of the, I can't find my word, the tissues, the parts of the brain that are sitting next to each other. That's not a very good way of saying that. Why can't I think of the word?
Have a great day.
Goodbyes. I don't do goodbyes very well, so I'll say see you later.
That's okay.
Okay.
Bye, Kim.